Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
Somewhere tonight, someone is standing in a doorway. The music is loud. The room is full. And their entire nervous system is screaming one word: leave. Not because they're afraid, not because they're weak, because somewhere, deep in the architecture of their brain, a decision has already been made. A decision most people never notice their own mind is making for them. There is a specific kind of person who would rather sit alone in a parked car for 20 minutes than walk into a party full of people who claim to love them. A person who feels more exhausted after 2 hours of small talk than after 10 hours of hard physical labor. A person who has been called too sensitive, too quiet, too intense, too much, by people who have never once had to survive inside that person's mind for a single day. This is not a personality flaw. This is not social anxiety pretending to be intellectual. This is a completely different operating system, built by evolution, refined by neuroscience, and almost entirely misunderstood by modern culture. By the end of this, you are going to understand exactly why certain minds recoil from crowds and crave silence. And you are going to understand something else, something most people never figure out in their entire lives. The very traits that make you feel broken in a loud room are the same traits that make you dangerous, brilliant, and almost impossible to fool. Stay until the end, because the final piece of this puzzle changes the way you will see every quiet person you have ever underestimated, including, possibly, yourself. The brain that cannot stop recording. Picture two people walking into the exact same room. The first person's brain does something merciful. It filters. It deletes 90% of what's happening around them without asking permission. The flickering light above the bar, the stranger's nervous laugh 3 tables away, the bass line vibrating faintly through the floor. Gone. Irrelevant. Filed under noise. The second person's brain does not have that mercy switch. It cannot find the delete button. Every flicker, every laugh, every shift in tone gets captured, stored, and cross-referenced in real time. Nothing is irrelevant. Everything might matter later. This is not imagination. This is not exaggeration for effect. Researchers have identified this trait and given it a clinical name: sensory processing sensitivity. It shows up in roughly 1 out of every 5 people, which means that right now, as you listen to this, someone in your own family, your own office, your own life is quietly processing the world at a depth the people around them cannot even imagine. Think about what that actually means moment to moment. A highly sensitive brain in a crowded room is not simply hearing conversation. It is simultaneously tracking 17 different vocal tones, reading 6 different sets of body language, registering the temperature of the room, noticing who hasn't spoken in the last 4 minutes, and quietly wondering why. While everyone else experiences the party in standard definition, this brain is running the entire scene in ultra-high resolution, whether it wants to or not. Now imagine carrying that processing load for 2 straight hours. Imagine your brain refusing to let anything go, filing a stranger's awkward laugh from 3 weeks ago under possibly important, and quietly pulling it back up for review at 2 in the morning while you're trying to fall asleep. That is not overthinking. That is not anxiety. That is a neural network doing precisely what it was engineered to do, hunting for patterns everyone else is too busy, too loud, or too distracted to see. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. This trait did not appear by accident. It survived because it worked. For most of human history, there was no such thing as a wasted nervous system. While the extroverted members of the tribe were laughing around the fire, oblivious and unguarded, it was the quiet ones at the edge of the group who heard the branch snap in the darkness. It was the quiet ones who noticed the berry that looked almost, but not quite, like the safe one. It was the quiet ones who felt the shift in the air before the storm arrived. Your ancestors did not survive because they ignored the world. They survived because someone in the group refused to stop paying attention. And that inheritance is still running in certain minds today, fully operational, except now it is misfiring inside fluorescent lit offices and crowded birthday parties instead of dark forests. The danger disappeared. The nervous system did not get the memo. But noticing everything is only step 1. Because a brain that records everything eventually starts to understand something far more uncomfortable than sound and light. It starts to understand people. And that is where things get genuinely unsettling. The human lie detector nobody asked to become. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how many people you spoke to and everything to do with how much you understood. Walk into any office holiday party, any extended family dinner, any networking mixer, and you will find 2 layers of conversation happening at once. There is the layer everyone can hear, the small talk, the compliments, the polite laughter. And underneath it, there is the layer almost nobody consciously notices, the tightness around someone's eyes when they say they're totally fine, the half-second delay before a colleague agrees with their boss's terrible idea, the way a friend's voice goes up half an octave right before they lie about being happy for you. For most people, that second layer stays buried, invisible, irrelevant. For a certain kind of mind, it is the only layer that matters, and it plays on a loop, whether invited or not. Psychologists refer to this as high perceptual sensitivity, but strip away the clinical language, and what you're really looking at is something closer to an involuntary superpower. A person with this trait doesn't choose to notice the gap between what someone says and what someone means. Their brain does it automatically, instantly, exhaustingly, the same way your eyes automatically detect movement in your peripheral vision, even when you're trying to focus on something else. Now picture what this does inside a workplace. A team meeting where the manager insists everyone is aligned while 3 people in the room are visibly gritting their teeth. A performance review where the compliments feel technically accurate and emotionally hollow at the same time. A friend group where one person keeps making jokes that are just a little too sharp to be entirely jokes. For most of the room, these moments pass unnoticed. For the highly perceptive mind, each one lands like a small, private alarm bell, quietly cataloged, rarely mentioned out loud, because saying it out loud would mean shattering an illusion everyone else seems desperate to protect. This is not a person who dislikes people. This is a person who is allergic to performance. There is a profound difference between the two, and almost nobody in their life has ever bothered to learn it. Research coming out of Cambridge has found something striking. People who consistently prefer solitude to socializing tend to score significantly higher in emotional intelligence than people who thrive in constant social stimulation. That finding alone should rewrite an entire cultural stereotype. The quiet person at the edge of the party is not socially incapable. They are frequently the most socially fluent person in the building. They have simply made a decision, consciously or not, to stop performing fluency for people who are only offering surface-level connection in return. This is why one honest 3 a.m. conversation can feel more nourishing than 50 networking events combined. It is not that the sensitive mind cannot handle small talk. It can, and often does, flawlessly, the way a fluent speaker can order coffee in a language they consider beneath their real thoughts. The issue is cost. Every minute spent performing shallow connection is a minute spent suppressing the brain's natural, almost compulsive drive toward depth. It is the equivalent of asking a cellist to spend the evening tapping a single note over and over, technically playing music, technically participating, while an entire symphony sits unplayed inside them. But understanding people this deeply comes with a price most outsiders never see. Because a brain this attuned to others doesn't just observe emotion from a safe distance. It absorbs it. And that absorption is about to explain something you have felt 1,000 times and never had the language for. The reward system running on a different fuel. Here is a question almost nobody asks. What if the highly sensitive brain isn't broken at parties? What if it's simply being rewarded by a completely different chemical? When a highly social, extroverted brain steps into a lively room, something close to fireworks goes off internally. Dopamine floods the system. Novel faces, loud music, constant stimulation, all of it registers as reward, as pleasure, as fuel. That brain leaves the party more energized than it arrived. Now place a highly sensitive, introverted brain in the exact same room. The dopamine system stays remarkably quiet, not broken, simply unmoved by the specific kind of stimulation that lights up an extroverted brain like a switchboard. Instead, a different neurotransmitter is doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes. Acetylcholine, a chemical strongly associated with introspection, sustained focus, and this is the part that changes everything: solitude itself. This single distinction explains a lifetime of confusion. It explains why some people leave a party buzzing and others leave it needing 3 days of recovery for what looked, from the outside, like a perfectly normal 2-hour event. It is not that solitude fails to reward the sensitive brain. It is that solitude is precisely where that brain's reward system was designed to activate. A quiet night with a book, a solo walk with no obligation to make conversation, an empty room and an uninterrupted train of thought. To an outsider, this looks like avoidance. Internally, it is the neurological equivalent of a standing ovation. There is supporting evidence for this that goes beyond behavior and straight into brain structure. Neuroscientists studying introverted minds have observed measurably thicker gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for abstract thinking, planning, and complex decision-making. In practical terms, this means that during moments that look, from the outside, like doing absolutely nothing, staring out a window, sitting quietly on a porch, lying awake at midnight, this particular brain is often at its most active, processing, connecting distant ideas, quietly assembling insights that will only become visible to the outside world weeks or months later. Picture 2 coworkers leaving the same stressful project. The first heads straight to a crowded bar, seeking noise, company, distraction, and comes back Monday recharged. The second goes home, closes the door, sits in silence with a cup of tea and their own unfiled thoughts, and comes back Monday equally recharged, having taken an entirely different road to the same destination. Neither is more evolved than the other. They are simply running on different fuel, and modern culture has spent decades quietly insisting that only one of those fuels counts as legitimate. This mismatch creates a particular kind of quiet suffering. Sensitive people are routinely pressured to chase dopamine-driven experiences that were never designed to reward their specific nervous system, pushed toward louder parties, bigger networking events, more constant stimulation, and then quietly blamed for their own exhaustion when the formula fails to work. Imagine being told, again and again, that the fuel your engine cannot run on is the only fuel worth having. But there is a deeper layer to this story still waiting underneath the surface. Because absorbing information from a room is one thing. Absorbing the actual emotions of everyone inside it is something else entirely. And it might be the single most exhausting, least understood part of this entire psychological profile. The emotional signal nobody can turn off. Have you ever walked into a room, said nothing, spoken to no one, and immediately known that something was wrong? Not because anyone told you, not because anything was visibly out of place. You simply felt it, instantly, the way you'd feel a sudden drop in temperature. This is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is a measurable neurological phenomenon connected to what scientists call mirror neurons. Brain cells that activate not only when we perform an action or feel an emotion ourselves, but when we witness someone else doing or feeling it. In most people, this system operates at a manageable volume. In highly sensitive individuals, it often runs at what can only be described as maximum gain, absorbing not just the visible surface of other people's emotional states, but the undercurrent beneath them. Spend 1 hour in a room of 30 people, and a highly sensitive mind is not simply managing its own internal state. It is quietly, involuntarily downloading fragments of 30 other internal states. The coworker's suppressed frustration, the friend's forced cheerfulness, the stranger's low-grade anxiety humming beneath a polite smile. None of it was requested. All of it gets absorbed anyway, the way a sponge does not choose which liquid to soak up once it's submerged. This reframes an experience so many people have quietly judged themselves for, needing days to recover from a single family gathering, a single office party, a single crowded wedding reception that everyone else seemed to walk away from unscathed. It was never really about the 2 hours spent in that room. It was about processing 30 people's worth of unspoken emotional weather while also trying to hold a conversation, eat appetizers, and pretend to remember someone's cousin's name. Consider a specific, quietly devastating scenario. A woman attends her sister's engagement party. On the surface, everything is joyful. toasts, laughter, clinking glasses. But underneath, she senses her mother's quiet disappointment that it isn't her turn yet, her father's anxious calculations about the cost of the open bar, her sister's fiancé masking a flicker of doubt behind an easy smile. Nobody says a word about any of it. She spends the entire night carrying all three currents simultaneously, smiling through appetizers, and drives home feeling as though she has run a marathon nobody else in that room even knew was happening. This is not oversensitivity in the dismissive, cultural sense of the word. This is one of the rarest and most demanding forms of emotional intelligence that exists. The capacity to read subtext most people can't even name, let alone manage in themselves. Most human beings struggle to fully understand their own emotions. The highly sensitive mind is simultaneously tracking dozens of other people's, often with painful accuracy, often without a single ounce of training in how to protect itself while doing it. And this is precisely why boundaries are not a luxury for this kind of mind. They are survival infrastructure. Without them, this trait becomes a slow, invisible drain, a gift with no off switch, running in the background of every family dinner, every crowded office, every unspoken tension in every room ever entered. But if this trait is this costly, this exhausting, this relentless, why would evolution have kept it around at all? The answer to that question goes back further than any of us, and it reframes everything that has been said so far. The watcher at the edge of the fire. Long before offices, before parties, before smartphones buzzing with invitations, there were only two kinds of people around a campfire. There were the ones fully immersed in the noise, the laughter, the story being told for the fifth time that week, utterly present in the moment and utterly unaware of anything beyond the circle of firelight. And then there were the watchers, the ones sitting slightly outside the group, half listening to the conversation, half scanning the tree line. The ones who noticed when the crickets stopped singing. The ones who felt, before anyone else did, that something in the dark had shifted. These were not the most popular members of the tribe. They were rarely the loudest, rarely the center of attention, rarely the ones remembered in the stories told afterward. But they were, again and again, across thousands of generations, the reason the tribe woke up the next morning at all. This is not poetic exaggeration. This is one of the leading evolutionary explanations for why sensory processing sensitivity persisted in the human gene pool at such a consistent rate across cultures and centuries, rather than being quietly bred out as an inefficient liability. A trait that costs energy, causes exhaustion, and makes socializing genuinely difficult should, in theory, be selected against over time. Instead, it has remained remarkably stable, generation after generation, at almost exactly the same proportion of the population. Roughly 1 in 5 in nearly every study, in nearly every culture examined. The reason is survival math. A group made entirely of bold, present, dopamine-driven extroverts is a group with no one watching the perimeter. A group with even a small percentage of hypervigilant, deeply observant members is a group that notices the predator earlier, the spoiled food sooner, the brewing conflict before it turns violent. The watchers were never a burden on the tribe. They were an insurance policy the tribe didn't know it was paying for. Fast forward tens of thousands of years, and that exact nervous system, finely tuned to scan for danger, read shifting group dynamics, and notice what others miss, is still fully installed and fully operational. Except now there are no predators in the tree line. There is only a crowded office holiday party, a loud family reunion, a group chat buzzing with plans for Saturday night. The threat detection system did not get an update. It simply redirected itself toward the closest available stimulus, other people, in large numbers, in unpredictable emotional states. This is why walking into a packed room can trigger something that feels disproportionately intense for what is, on paper, a perfectly safe social gathering. The body isn't reacting to the party. It's reacting the way it was built, to react to sustained, undifferentiated, high-density stimulation, the same category of situation, biologically speaking, that once might have concealed real danger. The nervous system isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly its ancient job, in an environment that no longer needs it. using tools that evolution never had time to retire. And once you understand that this trait was never a flaw to survive, but a role to fulfill, something remarkable starts to happen. The exhaustion doesn't disappear, but the shame around it does. Because the last thing left to understand isn't about the brain at all. It's about the world this brain has to live inside of, and the quiet decision required to finally stop apologizing for it. The quiet rebellion of choosing yourself. There is a specific kind of pressure that runs underneath modern life, so constant that most people stop noticing it exists at all. It says that a full calendar means a full life. It says that visibility equals value. It says that if you are not out, not seen, not surrounded, you are somehow falling behind in a race everyone else appears to be effortlessly winning. For a highly sensitive, deeply perceptive mind, this pressure lands differently than it does for most people. It doesn't just create mild social anxiety. It creates a quiet, persistent sense of failure. The feeling of being fundamentally unsuited for a world built entirely around noise, speed, and constant stimulation. But here is what that pressure conveniently leaves out. Silence is not emptiness. It is where clarity is manufactured. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the only environment in which a mind like this can finally stop translating everyone else's emotional weather and start listening to its own. Consider the quiet architecture of an ordinary evening spent alone by choice. No performance required. No emotional currents to track and manage. No masks to read or decode. Just a single, uninterrupted signal. The person's own thoughts, finally given enough silence to be heard clearly. For most people, this would register as boring. For a highly sensitive mind, this is the closest thing to true rest that exists. This reframes something that has likely been misjudged for years, possibly by the very person living inside this experience. Choosing a quiet night over a crowded one is not avoidance. It is not fear. It is not social failure dressed up in the language of preference. It is precise, intelligent resource management by a nervous system that understands, better than most, exactly what it needs to function at its highest level. There is a boundary worth drawing here, and it matters. This is not a justification for total isolation, nor an argument that connection doesn't matter. The highly sensitive mind still needs relationships, still needs closeness, still needs to be truly known by other people. But it needs that closeness in a form the loud world rarely offers. Depth over volume, honesty over performance, one real conversation over 50 shallow ones. Denying that need would be its own kind of self-betrayal. So would forcing constant exposure to environments this nervous system was never built to sustain. The people who eventually thrive with this trait are not the ones who force themselves to become louder, more social, more constantly available. They are the ones who finally stop measuring their worth by a standard designed for a completely different kind of mind. They learn to leave gatherings early without guilt. They learn to say no to invitations that promise noise but not connection. They learn that recovery time after socializing is not weakness. It is simply the cost of a uniquely powerful kind of perception. And that cost is worth paying deliberately, not apologetically. And there is something almost defiant in that choice. In a culture obsessed with being seen, choosing depth over visibility is its own quiet form of rebellion. In a culture that equates constant motion with success, choosing stillness is an act of self-respect most people never find the courage to make. So if you have ever left a party early and driven home in silence, relieved rather than regretful, if you have ever chosen a quiet weekend over a crowded one and quietly wondered what was wrong with you, understand this. Nothing was ever wrong. A nervous system built to notice everything, feel everything, and understand everyone was never going to feel comfortable in a world built for noise. That was never a defect. That was always the design. The quietest people in the room are so often mistaken for the ones with the least to offer. In reality, they are frequently the ones who understand the room the most completely. Its tensions, its truths, its unspoken currents, while saying almost nothing about any of it out loud. That is not absence. That is depth choosing not to perform. If this gave you language for something you have felt your entire life but never quite explained, there is another side to this story waiting next. One about the exact moment this trait first takes root, long before adulthood, long before anyone had a name for it at all.